Welcome to the chalkboard, my fellow football nerds, for episode number 170 of Chalk Talk. I'm your host, Shane Haff, and you can follow me on Twitter at ShaneHaffNFL. I'm flying solo today because of some scheduling conflicts with Mark. We were actually supposed to record last night, and I think both of us forgot. So we will both be back next week to bring you guys a week 1 or a week 3 recap show, but I'm going to fly solo today. And before we dive in, I do just want to mention off the top, if you enjoy the show, if you're watching live on YouTube, on Twitter, Twitch, Facebook, wherever you watch, please go check out the Eagles Pin Pull Network. You can get it wherever you stream your podcasts. If you like your podcast from some platform that you can't find us on, please DM me on Twitter, let me know, and we'll try to get it out there. But it's on all the major platforms. Please subscribe to it there, rate, review. It really helps us out as we try to monetize this and as we continue to try to be able to do this year over year. So we're going to dive in after that self-promotion here. We're going to dive in and talk about the NFC East teams, and then we'll throw it around the rest of the league. We'll cover every game that was played in week 2, with the exception of tonight's Monday Night Football matchup between the Eagles and the Falcons, which we'll obviously cover throughout the rest of the week on this network. So let's start off with the New Orleans Saints just laying it on the Dallas Cowboys in Dallas. They win 44-19, and the Cowboys' struggles against the run in this game were expected, and they allowed 4.9 yards per carry, but their struggles against the pass weren't. They allowed 15.2 yards per attempt to Derek Carr. New Orleans scored touchdowns on their first 6 drives, and these weren't short drives. It was an 80-yard drive, 4 70-yard drives, and a 20-yard drive. And they only faced a third down 3 times on their 5 first-half drives. Now, Micah Parsons didn't have much of an impact on this game. He only had 3 pressures. Not that the Saints really dropped back a lot in this game. They only had 17 total dropbacks, and when they were dropping back, they were generating explosive plays as the Cowboys were trying to stack the box, trying to stop the run, something that we thought going into the season might be a concern for their light offensive line. It wasn't all struggles just for the Cowboys defense, though. On offense, we saw their red zone struggles pop back up, and this is something they struggled with at times last season, and it's back. They were 0 of 3 scoring touchdowns in the red zone in this game. They were settling for field goals while the defense could not stop a nosebleed. And so far through 2 weeks, the Cowboys are only 10 of 27 on third downs, which is a place they really excelled last season. They had the second best conversion rate on third downs a year ago. And if I remember correctly, they had the highest EPA offensively on third downs. So it wasn't just about struggling on defense. It wasn't just about the New Orleans offense playing well. The defense held the Cowboys to 3.2 yards per rushing attempt. They weren't really able to get anything going on the ground. Ezekiel Elliott only has 2.7 yards per carry. Rico Dowdle had 30 yards on 7 carries. And so not a good performance by the offensive line and the rushing attack. They sacked Dak 3 times. They picked him off twice. We knew the Saints defense would be good, but with the Saints offense playing so good with new offensive coordinator Clint Kubiak, the defense has taken its game up another step. They're not consistently being relied on to pitch 10-point games to have a chance to win. And we've seen that through 2 weeks. The Saints have a plus 62-point differential. And this is the team that the Eagles will play on the road in the Superdome at a disadvantage next week as they're coming off a Monday night game. And so this game suddenly has a lot of intrigue as the Saints sit 2-0. And, it was easy to wave your fingers and just, wave away a dominating performance over the Panthers in week 1 because the Panthers, as we'll get to in a bit, they stink. But the Cowboys are a good offense and they're a good defense, and they were just destroyed by the Saints. So Alvin Kamara had a really good game. He had 115 yards rushing. He also added 65 yards receiving, 3 touchdowns on the ground, 1 through the air. And Alvin Kamara became only the 5th player in NFL history to have multiple games with 150 or more scrimmage yards and 4 or more touchdowns in this game. So really good performance by the Saints, really troubling performance by the Cowboys, who dropped a head scratcher of a week 2 game a year ago against the Cardinals and it didn't really derail their season. So we'll see if they're able to get back on track next week. I've got a comment here from Zach on YouTube saying, been scratching at my neck for more pin pull content. Glad you're here. It'll all come like flying in this week with the Monday night game. You guys will get a post-game show tonight. You'll get all of our normal shows. It's just going to be compressed a little bit. So it does feel weird not having a post-game show to listen to on the drive into work on Monday mornings, but you guys will have that tomorrow night. So let's keep rolling along here, and you guys continue to comment in the chat. It's always fun to interact with y'all, especially when I'm flying solo like this. But let's roll on to the New York Giants at the Washington Commanders. So the other two NFC East teams played each other. Washington wins this game 21-18, and this was the game of kickers, or for the Giants, lack thereof. Washington signed kicker Austin Siebert to replace Cade York after he missed 2 field goals in week 1. He promptly set a franchise record, hitting 7 field goals in this game. Washington's offense was in the red zone 6 times. They walked away with 0 touchdowns. That's dreadful, but it ended up being enough. Meanwhile, the Giants kicker Graham Gano came into this game nursing an injury, and then he was injured on the opening kickoff of the game. And so the first time they scored a touchdown, they brought their punter in to attempt the extra point, and he missed. And so the Giants went for 2 and failed both times after their next 2 touchdowns. And then tied late in the fourth quarter, they went for it on a 4th and 4 from the 22-yard line and failed, which would have given them the lead. Instead, the Commanders drive down the field and kick a field goal to win the game. And so Brian Daboll was questioned about the kicker decision. He got really defensive in the press conference. You can go find that clip out on Twitter, but it's not a good look to be that defensive as a coach, probably, and I would imagine the seat is pretty hot for Brian Daboll at this point. Jaden Daniels in this game went 23 of 29 for 226 yards. He scaled back his rushing attempts. He only rushed 10 times for 44 yards, which is something that they spoke about throughout the week, that they want Daniels to be a passer first and not to run as much as he did in the opening game. However, he did still take his fair share of hits. He was sacked 5 times. Like, we've got a Twitter comment here from Coda's Cave mentioning that Washington has to get the offensive line improved. He gets hit every play, and he did take a lot of hits in this game. And so they've got to figure something out on the offensive line. A good running game is a good start, and Brian Robinson Jr. did rush 17 times for 133 yards here. And so if they can continue to ride a rushing attack, if they can keep Jaden Daniels upright, there were still some misses in this game from Daniels, but overall, even though he doesn't look as dynamic as a runner in this one, I liked his performance here better than I did week 1. Now, granted, he's playing the Giants instead of the Buccaneers. On the Giants side, I guess you can call this a positive, but they scored a touchdown on their opening drive, which broke a 27-game streak of not scoring a touchdown on their opening drive. So they've got that going for them. They've also got Malik Neighbors going for them, and that's really about it. Malik Neighbors had 10 catches for 127 yards and a touchdown on 18 targets. All other pass catchers for the Giants combined for 6 receptions and 51 yards on 9 targets. So 2/3 of Daniel Jones' targets went to Malik Neighbors. And Daniel Jones is figuring out that if he wants to look good, just chuck it up there and see if Malik Neighbors can make a play. And to be honest, there are worse plans than that for Daniel Jones in this offense. So at this point, with Washington winning this game, Washington's 1-1, the Giants are 0-2, the Cowboys are 1-1. So the Eagles remain the only undefeated team in the NFC East. And as we'll get to later, several other NFC contenders really stumbled this week. So the Eagles have a chance to do themselves, put themselves a game ahead of everyone else with a win on Monday night, which, if my years of an Eagles fan have taught me anything, it's that a great Sunday that with seeing all the Eagles rivals lose just sets up perfectly for the Eagles to drop a disappointing one. So hopefully that's not the case this week. But that's your NFC East report. Let's throw it around the rest of the NFL now, and we'll start off with Thursday Night Football, where the Buffalo Bills beat the Miami Dolphins 31-10. On paper, this looked like a game that would be a tough matchup for the Bills. They lost a lot off of their defense in the offseason. They were missing cornerback Taron Johnson and linebacker Matt Milano in this game. They had another linebacker, Terrell Bernard, leave with an injury in the first quarter. And yet the Bills just shut down the Dolphins offense. They intercepted Tua 3 times. They held the Dolphins to 1 of 5 on 4th down attempts. I thought this was a really good game for James Cook, who had 78 yards and 2 touchdowns on 11 carries. He also had a 17-yard receiving touchdown. Josh Allen was playing with the hand injury, and so he didn't do as much in this game. He only throws for 139 yards on 19 attempts. He didn't take a sack. He only had 2 rushing attempts for 2 yards. And so, it's a big win for a Bills team to go into Miami on a short week with the injury concerns they have, with Josh Allen banged up, and just put it on a division rival. On the Dolphins side of the ball, Devon Achane was really all the offense had going for him in this game. He had 22 carries for 96 yards, also had 7 receptions for 69 yards and a touchdown. He was the team's leading rusher and receiver. The problem is he was a game-time decision with an ankle injury. So why is he still out there with a backup quarterback down 21 with 5 minutes left in the fourth quarter? That's just really poor management from a coach. You should not be putting a guy who already has injury concerns just due to his profile that is coming into a game with injury concerns. It doesn't make sense to continue to keep him out there like that. So I did not like that decision by Josh McDaniels. This game was over when Tua went down with an injury. And that's, of course, the main long-lasting storyline from this one. Tua gets a concussion while scrambling for a first down in the late third quarter. He had the first down, and he lowered his head into Damar Hamlin. And you just can't do that. Like, there's a difference in lowering a shoulder and lowering a head. And he just lowered his head straight into Hamlin. It didn't even look like a particularly hard hit. Hamlin said after the game he thought that Tua was about to slide, give himself up, and Tua's head snapped sideways. And he's a guy who's had a lot of concussion problems in the past. It looked nasty in this one. And so hopefully Tua is okay. I won't say hopefully he's able to come back. I'm really concerned about Tua long-term health-wise. He's had a lot of concussions pile up. So hopefully he gets good advice from doctors, and the Dolphins don't push him into playing before he's ready. And I don't think they'll do that. Mike McDaniel talked about Tua after the game, saying that he'd spoken with Tua and told him he's a starting quarterback for his family. And so I love that response from a coach. Hopefully that's what happens behind closed doors as well. And, hopefully Tua makes a good decision if he does decide to come back. Hopefully he's able to do it without injury, but you hate to see that. It's hard to transition and talk football after you talk about something like that, but we're going to do it anyways because that's what this show is for. And we're going to get into the Sunday slate now, where we see another NFC contender fall to 1-1 as the Tampa Bay Buccaneers beat the Detroit Lions. And it's funny that the NFC South has 2 undefeated teams, and both of them went through a major contender in the Cowboys and the Lions to get there. It's crazy looking at the stat line in this game. Aiden Hutchinson recorded 4.5 sacks. The Lions had 463 yards of offense. They converted a fake punt, but the Bucs still won, and they did so without Antoine Winfield, Kalijah Kancey, and Vita Vea. The Lions just made too many mistakes in this one, and none more glaring than their end-of-half management. They got the ball back at their own 47-yard line with 1:52 left and all 3 timeouts. You're 53 yards from your end zone with almost 2 minutes and 3 timeouts, and you end up running out of time. Like, with 49 seconds left, they were at the Tampa Bay 28, and they called a run play, and they were saved from using their 3rd timeout by an injury to a Bucs player. But on the very next play, Jared Goff scrambles for 2 yards instead of throwing the ball away, and they have to burn the 3rd timeout. And then with 17 seconds left on the Tampa Bay 17, they throw short over the middle. They're tackled in bounds, and then somehow they end up with too many men on the field to spike the ball. It's just egregious mismanagement in that situation. That ends up costing them in this game. Like, if you score a touchdown, If you kick a field goal, who knows how it changes, later in the game. But if you score a touchdown, you probably win this football game. And it was just terrible mismanagement by them. And I thought Jared Goff made poor decisions in this game. He routinely threw short of the sticks, the aforementioned scramble instead of throwing the ball away. He did throw 2 interceptions. They didn't lean on the rushing attack enough without Vita Vea. I mean, Vita Vea and Kalijah Kancey are out of this game, and they averaged 5.1 yards per attempt, but they threw the ball 56 times. I don't get it. They also only went 1 of 7 in the red zone in this game. And so Tampa Bay becomes the second team to win in NFL history, the second team to win a game, despite being outgained by over 200 yards and having a sack differential of -5 or worse. So I don't know. I don't even know what you make of that one. The Lions will have to try to flush that one and move on next week. Let's go to Green Bay, where the Green Bay Packers, playing without Jordan Love, faced the Indianapolis Colts, and they won 16-10. Malik Willis stepped in for an injured Jordan Love, and he outplayed Anthony Richardson, who was awful in this game. Malik Willis went 12 of 14 for 122 yards and a touchdown. He rushed 6 times for 41 yards. Anthony Richardson was 17 of 34 for 204 yards and a touchdown. He added 3 interceptions, and he rushed for 37 yards. But the story of this game, I mean, we can talk about Anthony Richardson's struggles, but the real story of this game is the Packers' rushing attack, which piled up 237 yards before halftime while attempting only 6 passes. The Colts defense did tighten up the box in the second half, but they just couldn't get much going offensively. Josh Jacobs ended this game with 151 yards rushing, but he was held out of the end zone. He was stripped near the goal line when the Packers were up 10-0 and driving to try to make it 17-0. The Colts did get Jonathan Taylor going in this game. He struggled in week 1. He had 12 carries for 103 yards in week 2, but it just wasn't enough. And I mentioned it before, but Anthony Richardson was flat out bad in this game. But he's not the only one. You can't pin it all on him. A.D. Mitchell dropped multiple passes. I thought the game plan was rough. The Colts didn't use Richardson as a runner enough, especially as much as he was struggling through the air. It was just a disconcerting performance offensively for the Colts, who dropped to 0-2 now. And in the first 2 weeks of the season, Anthony Richardson has thrown more interceptions against man coverage, 2, than he has completions. He's only completed 1 pass against man coverage so far this year. Another cool note from this game is that the Packers became the first NFL franchise to ever reach the 800 victory mark. There are 2 other teams over 700 victories. And if you want to pause the podcast real quick and guess who those might be, I'll wait just a second. The Bears are number 2 at 794 wins. They trail the Packers by 6. The Giants are the only other team over 700 at 721. Okay, let's keep rolling here to Tennessee, where the New York Jets win 24-17. This was an ugly win for the Jets, but an ugly win helps them avoid the 0-2 curse. Only 6.25% of teams that have started 0-2 have made the playoffs since the playoff expansion. And so it's important to avoid that 0-2 hole. And it was narrowly done. The Titans were on the verge of taking a 2-score lead when Will Levis made just another boneheaded turnover. We talked about the one last week where he was in the grasp and he just tossed the ball up and threw a pick 6. It was awful. This week, you're in the red zone. He gets pressured and he tried a lateral as he's falling to the ground that ended up being a fumble. Just horrific mistake there by Will Levis, who had played well up until that point, but at a certain point, you just have to stop making these stupid decisions. And I don't know. I would be wondering who the backup was. I might have gone to the backup after that lateral if I was the Titans. But it was a rough game overall for the Titans up front. Will Levis was sacked 4 times. He was pressured on 60% of his dropbacks. The Jets took the lead in this one after a blocked punt in the third quarter. Another cool highlight from this game is that Calvin Ridley made one of the crazier catches you'll see this year. And it wasn't some spectacular one-handed grab. It was more of I have no idea how this ball got between the safety and the cornerback. And you can go look at it. I tweeted it out, but Watching the play, I thought it was intercepted. And there's a safety in a corner closing. There is no room, and somehow Calvin Ridley just runs into the end zone with the ball. It was crazy. I'm not sure I've seen a catch like that in a while. Braylon Allen had a nice day for the Jets. He had 33 yards and a touchdown on 7 carries. He added a touchdown on 23 receiving yards. And so Braylon Allen had a nice little performance. Breece Hall and Braylon Allen combined for 12 of Aaron Rodgers' 30 targets. The passing game continues to be a work in progress for the Jets. But one thing Aaron Rodgers brings is he does take care of the football. And when you're playing a team that struggles to do so, like the Titans, that's going to win out. But the Jets were definitely hoping for more from this offense when they made all of the moves that they did. Another blow to the Jets in this game defensively is pass rusher Jermaine Johnson is feared to have torn his Achilles, which further magnifies the Hassan Reddick holdout. And we'll see if the Jets sort of cave into that or if they're able to reach some sort of agreement with Jermaine Johnson, feared to be lost for the year. I've got a comment from Kwan on YouTube that says Mason Rudolph is the backup in Tennessee. I'm telling you, after that Will Levis pass, I would have really considered going to him. There's a bad mistake, and then there's just egregiously stupid mistakes, and that was the latter. So let's keep rolling here to another NFC contender that fell. The San Francisco 49ers travel to Minnesota, and they walk out with a loss, 17-23. Brian Flores put Brock Purdy under a lot of pressure in this game. Purdy was sacked 6 times. He threw 1 interception, and he just generally looked uncomfortable. Now, I say he looked uncomfortable. San Francisco still finished with 399 yards of total offense, and they did it without Christian McCaffrey for the second game in a row, who is now on IR and will miss at least 3 more games. But they only put up 17 points. Brandon Ayuk continues his slow start to the year. Since he got paid and ended his holdout, he has only 6 catches for 71 yards through 2 games. So the 49ers were certainly hoping for more from Ayuk. And, they hope Ayuk will get back up to speed quickly. Perhaps that holdout is affecting his play right now. Sam Darnold, he played really well against the Giants, and we barely took notice. We kind of wrote it off more as the Giants defense being really bad, which I believe. But against the 49ers, he played well again. He was 17 of 26 for 268 yards. He threw 2 touchdowns and only 1 interception. That interception, by the way, was a beautiful bait job by Fred Warner, who I mentioned on Twitter both after that one and after he punched out the ball at the goal line to force a fumble. Fred Warner is one of my favorite players to watch in the league. I wish he did not play for the 49ers, a team that I don't particularly like. There's a lot of bad blood there with the Eagles, of course, but Fred Warner is just incredible to watch play. By far, he's the best linebacker, and the gap between 1 and 2 probably is bigger than the gap between 2 and 30. He's that good. So much fun to watch. But Sam Darnold played really well. There's no shame in Fred Warner getting you once in a while. Darnold also rushed for 32 yards on 5 carries. For the Vikings, Justin Jefferson left this game with an injury, but he tweeted that he's not expecting to miss time. He had a beautiful 97-yard touchdown. It was a play action, max protect, a 2-man route concept from the shadow of your own end zone, and Sam Darnold laid it up, and Justin Jefferson catches it. Turns the defensive back around and ends up scoring. Per Next Gen Stats, he traveled 127.5 yards on that touchdown reception, which is the most distance traveled by a ball carrier on an offensive touchdown in the Next Gen Stats era. So the Vikings win. They improve to 2-0. The 49ers fall to 1-1. Next, let's go to Foxborough, where the Seattle Seahawks go to overtime with the New England Patriots, but they are able to win the football game. Kenneth Walker was out in this game, and Zach Charbonnet, a guy that I really liked in the draft, really struggled to run the ball. He had only 38 yards on 14 carries. But DK Metcalf and Jackson Smith and Jigba both had double-digit receptions for triple-digit yardage. I forgot to switch tabs here. It was DK Metcalf 10 for 129 and a touchdown, JSN 12 for 117. And so great performances by them. The Patriots took a lead in the early 4th quarter when they scored a touchdown to go up 20-17, and then they drove into field goal range. But Julian Love blocked the field goal attempt Julian Love blocked the field goal attempt that would have extended the lead to 6, which it's normally a bad idea in the late fourth quarter to kick a field goal to go from up 3 to up 6. But on 4th and 15, I'm not sure what the analytics say, but I think he probably kicked that. Julian Love blocks it, and then Seattle goes on a 9-play drive to get into field goal range, and they score the game-tying field goal with under a minute to go. In overtime, the Pats win the toss. They go 3 and out, and the Seahawks hit a field goal to win the game. But the Patriots, they are going to be a competitive team this year, and I expected them to be a pretty bad team, but they're riding a really good rushing attack, and it was Ramondre Stevenson in week 1, and he wasn't by any means bad in week 2 with 21 carries for 81 yards and a touchdown, but it was Antonio Gibson who stole the show, rushing for 96 yards on 11 carries. Another piece that Patriots fans should really love is Christian Gonzalez, cornerback they selected in the first round of the draft last year. He was my CB1. He looked good early as a rookie before sustaining a season-ending injury. In this game, DK Metcalf was lined up across from Christian Gonzalez on 36 of his 44 routes. And on those 36 routes, Metcalf was targeted 7 times. He had 3 receptions for 24 yards. On his other 8 routes that he wasn't covered by Gonzalez, he had 7 targets for 7 receptions, 105 yards, and a touchdown. So Christian Gonzalez had a really good day against Metcalf when nobody else really did. I really think that, I continue to stand by. He's going to be one of the top corners in the league as long as he stays healthy. We've got a comment here asking when the Patriots will crack the seal on Drake May. That's a good question. I've been pretty well on the record saying that you shouldn't draft a quarterback top 5 if you're not going to play him. And I stand by that. They've got a pretty tough stretch of defenses coming up with the Jets and the 49ers. And those are both on the road. But then they get into a 4-game homestand against the Dolphins, the Texans, the Jaguars, and then the Jets again. I could maybe see him coming out of that week 4 game, especially if they drop back-to-back games and they sit at 1-3. Generally, I think Jacoby Brissett bought himself some time winning week 1. But again, we're through 2 weeks and Jacoby Brissett's under 300 total passing yards. So I would like to see Drake May sooner than later. I don't think it definitely won't be this week off of a short week on the road. Maybe they do off of that longer week going into week 4, but I wouldn't throw him to the Wolves against the 49ers. I would wait an IO week 5. So if I was guessing, that's what I would probably do if I was the 49ers, or if I was the Patriots rather. So let's keep rolling now, and let's get into the Carolina Panthers. And this is just a tough team to watch. They lose at home 26-3 to the Chargers. And I guess we can talk about the Chargers first. Quentin Johnston finally showed something in this game. First round rookie last year, had a really bad year, but he has 5 receptions for 51 yards on 6 targets in this game, and he scored 2 touchdowns. It's a very low passing volume offense. They attempted only 20 passes versus 44 rushing attempts, but he did make the most of it in this week. So we'll see if he can continue to stack games off of that. J.K. Dobbins had 131 yards on 17 carries with a touchdown in this one, as the Chargers just roll the Panthers. And the Panthers might be on 0-17 watch. I would say their best shot to win is week 8. They go to Denver. We can pull up their schedule here so you guys can see it. But week 8, they have a game at Denver. Bo Nix hasn't looked good. Maybe that one's winnable, but it is at Mile High. Week 10, they play the New York Giants. If they don't pick up a win before their bye in week 11, though, they have the Chiefs, the Buccaneers, at the Eagles, the Cowboys, the Cardinals, at Tampa Bay, at Atlanta to close the season. I don't see a super winnable game there. And so it's the NFL. Weird things happen. We see a team that's a touchdown or more underdog win games all the time, but it's hard to find a win for the Panthers on this schedule. Their offense didn't pick up a first down until their 5th drive in this one. And Bryce Young promptly threw an interception on the next play. He attempted 26 passes. He had 84 passing yards and an interception. And through 2 games, the Panthers have a negative 60 point differential. So I don't know if you're a Panthers fan. I think at this point, you're probably rooting for the number 1 overall pick to replace Bryce Young. And I feel terrible for Bryce Young. I think he was overdrafted. I think he was drafted into a terrible situation by a terrible team that gave up a lot to go and get him. And his narrow pathway to success in the NFL was made even narrower. So I hope he shows something. I hope he's able to stick in the league, but it's not looking good for Bryce Young and the Panthers. So let's go to a comment real quick. It says from YouTube, the Panthers will be 0-17 if they don't bench Bryce Young. He's lost all his confidence and is currently the worst quarterback in the league. Another comment asking when the Panthers crack the seal on Andy Dalton. I don't think they do. I mean, this is Bryce Young's a starter this year. The Panthers are under no illusions, hopefully, that they're going to make the playoffs. You have to give Bryce Young maximum opportunities this year, maximum reps. And if he's truly that bad, you would like to have the number 1 overall pick to try to replace him. So it's kind of, I hate to use the phrase win-win for a team that I just said might go 0-17, but it's kind of win-win. Either Bryce Young shows you something and you win a few games and can hopefully build around him, or he shows you he's not the guy, and in the process, he helps hand you the number 1 pick. So the worst case scenario would be that they win a few games, but Young still just looks really bad. That should be what Panthers fans are rooting against. Let's keep rolling now to Jacksonville, where the Cleveland Browns beat the Jacksonville Jaguars 18-13. The Jags only had 81 yards of offense in the first half of this game. In the third quarter, Trevor Lawrence was 5 of 16 with 16 passing yards partway through the third quarter. Now, the Jags did kind of sort of claw their way back into it a bit, but Cleveland's defense was suffocating. And that kind of makes it really strange to riddle out the Cowboys, who just killed the Browns in week 1. And then they go on to week 2 and can't do much of anything against the Saints defense. Meanwhile, the Browns defense shuts down the Jaguars. And so small sample sizes, but the Browns defense played really well. The Jags continue to jag. We're just going to call it jagging whenever a team screws up. They had 2 roughing the passer penalties to extend drives. They took 2 delay games in goal-to-go situations. They had an illegal shift on the final drive that cost them a 10-second runoff as they're trying to go on a game-winning drive. It's just a disaster in Jacksonville. I feel like everybody's on the hot seat in Jacksonville. Trevor Lawrence had a completion percentage over expectation of negative 11.2% in this game. Everything looks bad in Jacksonville, and it looks even worse when Aiden Hutchinson, the guy that you passed over to take Trevon Walker, who had 2 tackles in this game, has 4.5 sacks. And just some bad drafting and some bad coaching. And ultimately the Jaguars face a big uphill climb to even try to make it to the playoffs following an 0-2 start. Again, 6.25% of teams that start 0-2 make the playoffs since the playoffs expanded to include a third wild card team. So let's keep rolling now. Let's go to yet another team that's starting out 0-2. This time it's going to be the Baltimore Ravens, a team that, we looked at their schedule and said week 1 against the Chiefs is rough, but at least they get the Raiders in week 2. And they lost this game. And this one was a brutal loss too. Last week it was a toe on the end line. This week it was a 10-point lead with under 10 minutes to go. The Raiders go 64 yards for a field goal. The Ravens go 3 and out. The Raiders go 70 yards for a touchdown. The Ravens go 3 and out. And then the Raiders go on a field goal drive to win the game. Devontae Adams and Brock Bowers combined for 21 targets in this game. The rest of the Raiders combined for 17. Adams had 9 receptions for 110 yards and a touchdown. Brock Bowers had 9 receptions for 98 yards. And the Ravens defense was good early in this game. They even sacked Minshew 5 total times, but they allowed 20 points on the Raiders' final 4 drives. And to add on to that, Justin Tucker continues to struggle on long kicks. He missed a 56-yard field goal in this one, which is no gimme, but he missed from 53 last week. And dating back to the start of last season, he's now 1 of 7 from 50-plus yards. And so Justin Tucker used to be Mr. Automatic. I don't know what's going on in Baltimore, but it looks like Justin Tucker is on a major decline. And the Ravens now find themselves 0-2, facing again that 6.25% chance. I keep hammering that, but this is the first time the Ravens have started 0-2 since 2015. They've never made the playoffs since when they've started a season 0-2. And they had high expectations for this season, coming off an AFC title game loss. Meanwhile, the Raiders are 1-1. Max Crosby, for the second week in a row, played every defensive snap, and he had 4 tackles for loss, 1 pass defense, 5 pressures, and 2 sacks. And yeah, we've got a comment coming in from Steve here on Facebook. And again, you guys continue dropping these comments. I love taking a break from hosting solo to read your comments, for one thing, but it's almost like I've got a co-host. You guys are my co-host today. And he says these are the losses that will haunt the Ravens when it comes to playoff positioning. And again, the Ravens are in a really tough North that has the Browns, that has a really good defense. They've got the Steelers, who have a really good defense. They've got, the Bengals, who are coming off a really tough loss. But there's a lot of teams here. We'll get to the Bengals in a minute. It's a tough division, and you really don't want to be starting 0-2. All right, let's get into the afternoon slate now. This game wasn't a very good game, but the Arizona Cardinals beat the Rams in a laugher, 41-10. And so, about those Marvin Harrison Jr. concerns, there was a tweet going around about his max speed, and it was one of the lowest in Next Gen Stats history in week 1. And all of a sudden we're concerned about Marvin Harrison Jr. Well, Marvin Harrison Jr. had 4 receptions for 130 yards and 2 touchdowns in the first quarter of this game. In the first quarter, he is the first rookie to have 4 or more receptions and 2 or more touchdowns in the first quarter since 1996. And again, we can play a guessing game here. Who is the rookie receiver that did it in 1996? I'll give you a second to pause if you want to think. It's his dad, Marvin Harrison. Marvin Harrison did it in 1996 as a rookie. But Marvin Harrison Jr. has more receiving yards in the first quarter of this game at 130 than his dad had in any single game in his rookie season in 1996. Now, Marvin Harrison Jr. didn't catch another pass the rest of the game, but he definitely came out of the gate strong, and they didn't really need much after that first quarter. The Rams' offensive woes continue in this game. They allowed 3 sacks in Matthew Stafford's first 11 dropbacks. They ended up with 5 sacks allowed on the day, and then Cooper Kupp exits the game with an ankle injury. And so the Rams are so beat up, they dropped to 0-2, and I feel like there's there's some stat about teams that start 0-2. I can't quite remember what it. 6.25% of teams that start 0-2 make the playoffs. And Kawan chimes in, says that I'm going to hear 6.25% in my sleep tonight. It's going to be tough sledding for the Rams, especially in the division they're in, where the Seahawks look pretty good and the Cardinals look pretty good. And I mean, the 49ers were a favorite, but they're coming off of a loss now. So the Cardinals offense in this game was electric. Kyler Murray was 17 of 21 for 266 yards and 3 touchdowns. He added 59 yards on the ground. And Steve is chiming in asking how we feel about Murray after the first 2 weeks. I mean, he was a little up and down in week 1. I thought he was really good in week 2. He was good. He didn't throw an incomplete deep pass, which is 20 or more yards. He didn't throw an incomplete pass on the move in this game. So he was firing on all cylinders, and it was supplemented with a good rushing attack. James Conner rushed for 122 yards and a touchdown, as the Cardinals scored on 7 of their first 8 drives, 5 touchdowns, 2 field goals, and it includes a 13-play, 99-yard drive that put them up 21-0. So I'm feeling good about Kyler Murray so far. The Cardinals offense has looked pretty good through 2 weeks. And so it'll be interesting to see if the 49ers sort of falter a little bit with the Christian McCaffrey injury and Brandon Ayuk struggling out of the gate. It'll be interesting to see what the Cardinals can do if they can sneak into the chase for the division title. So let's go on to Denver, where the Pittsburgh Steelers go to Mile High and they win 13-6. And in this game, the Steelers defense just rolled again. Through 2 games, they have allowed only 1 touchdown and 16 total points. 16 total points in 2 weeks. Now, it was against the Falcons, who we'll see how they look in week 2, and the Broncos, who are starting a rookie quarterback that should not have been a first-round pick, but still it's impressive. They intercepted Bo Nix twice. They sacked him twice. They held Javonte Williams to 1.5 yards per rushing attempt. I thought Justin Fields looked really good early in this game, but in the second half, he only had 16 passing yards on 8 attempts. Now, he did have a beautiful 51-yard pass on the run to George Pickens, wiped out by a penalty. But overall, the Steelers are 2-0. Justin Fields should remain the starter, but the second half of that game was a little concerning. Hopefully, they don't go cold like that on a weekly basis. But the Steelers' defense is legit, and they haven't played a great offense yet, but those games are coming. Probably not next week against the Chargers or even the next week against the Colts, but they've got the Cowboys in week 5, the Jets in week 7. And so it'll be interesting to see this team against some of the top offenses in the league and see if they're able to continue to hold up. It shouldn't surprise us. I mean, we should expect it. They've been so good over the years. I would expect their defense to continue to roll. Now let's go on to Arrowhead, where the Chiefs win this game 26-25 on a controversial finish, and we'll get to the finish, but the Chiefs struggled with turnovers in this game. Mahomes threw 2 interceptions. Carson Steele fumbled the ball. They were also only 1 of 8 on third downs, but they were able to navigate into field goal range to win by 1. It was not without theatrics. There was a 4th and 6 where they converted, and then it was called back on a holding penalty. And so then on 4th and 16, they go for, obviously they have to go for it, and it's an incomplete pass, but defensive pass interference was called. And people are going to complain about this. People have certainly been complaining about it. It was the right call. I don't know where this notion of the defensive player was playing the ball comes from, but you can't go through an offensive player to play the ball. If you could, everyone would just claim they were playing the ball and tackle receivers. That's not how it works. We talk about in draft scouting, they're really good at body positioning and they sort of block out the defender, and that's something that you can do. I mean, I don't know where this comes from. From the NFL rule book, it lists prohibited acts by both teams while the ball is in the air. And it explicitly says playing through the back of an opponent in an attempt to make a play on the ball. And so I don't know where this idea came from. If the defender is in front, the offensive player cannot run through them to make the catch. You just can't do it. The only time and maybe this is where this misunderstanding comes from, is the underthrown pass interferences where the offensive player fights back to the ball and collides with the defensive player. That's only if the defensive player doesn't turn and locate the ball. That's the only time you can initiate that contact like that, because the defensive player is not playing the ball. They're playing the receiver, and they impeded the offensive player's path. And so this was the right call. And I get that people don't like the Chiefs. I get that there is a history of penalties deciding Chiefs-Bengals games. It was the right call. If we want to talk about flags, we can talk about the Jamar Chase. We can talk about Jamar Chase drawing a 15-yard penalty for getting in an official's face to turn a 3rd and 7 into a 3rd and 22, which killed a Bengals drive earlier in the game. He was upset because he thought I'm not sure if it was face mask or a hip drop tackle he was upset about. It wasn't either one of those. And so Jamar Chase lost his cool, gets flagged, kills that Bengals drive. That's the penalty we should be talking about if we want to use a penalty to assign blame in this game. I'll step off that soapbox and talk about the rest of the game, though. Kingsley Suamataia, the rookie left tackle for the Chiefs, was dominated in this game by Trey Hendrickson. And, I mean, Trey Hendrickson just had himself a game. 2 sacks, 3 quarterback hits, 2 tackles for loss, drew a couple holding penalties. It just ultimately wasn't enough. I think for Bengals fans, despite dropping to 0-2, and again, 6.25% chance, but despite dropping to 0-2, you can say Joe Burrow looked better in this game. And there wasn't much of a running game to speak of. Burrow did it through the air. And so hopefully the injury concerns about his wrist will melt away because of this performance. Andre Iosivas had 2 receptions in this game for 7 yards, but they were both touchdowns. Andre Iosivas is like that guy in high school you got assigned to a group project with, and he just showed up for the presentation and got the A even though he didn't do the rest of the work. But I just thought that was funny that he only has 7 receiving yards, but he gets 2 touchdowns. For the Chiefs, I've got a player to highlight on offense and defense. Defensively, Trent McDuffie lined up across from Jamar Chase on 17 of his 38 routes and allowed only 1 reception for 4 yards. Trent McDuffie is proving that he can play outside. I thought I loved Trent McDuffie in his draft. I thought he could play outside. A lot of people thought he was a slot limited corner, and he's gotten his opportunity this year after they lose. I'm blanking on their corner, L'Jarius Sneed from last year. He's played in the slot some, but he's also played outside, and he's definitely acquitted himself well. Travis Kelce, on the other hand, is off to a very slow start. He had 1 reception for 5 yards, and he now has only 39 receiving yards in 2024. That's the fewest of any 2-game span of his career. It is also puts him on pace for roughly 330 yards this season. So I'm not going to worry about Kelce because I worried about Kelce last year and it did not matter. I doubt it matters this year. I'm sure he'll turn it on as we get to the playoffs, but it is something that bears mentioning and bears watching. I've got another comment from Kwan. How many hip drop penalties have been called this season? I honestly have no idea. I haven't noticed one, but I watch a lot of games at once and some stuff slips by, so I'll have to look that one up later on. And then let's get on to the Sunday night game. So if you guys are dropping comments, you're running out of time. We're about to wrap this show up, but you can drop a comment here and we'll see what you guys have to say. But Sunday Night Football, the Chicago Bears traveled to Houston. They lose 19-13, and Will Anderson Jr. led the way for this Texans defense with 1.5 sacks. He had 2 tackles for loss, 2 quarterback hits. He also had 9 pressures. Danielle Hunter had 1.5 sacks. He had 2 tackles for loss. He had two QB hits. And Caleb Williams was pressured on 48% of his dropbacks in this game. He took 7 sacks, and he ended with 174 receiving yards and 2 interceptions. The Bears offense did find the end zone on a Khalil Herbert touchdown run, but they lost the game, which ironically makes the Bears 1-0 this season when their offense does not score a touchdown in week 1, and 0-1 in games where their offense does score a touchdown. So I don't know, maybe the Bears should just start getting to the goal line and kicking field goals. Obviously joking with that, but the Bears offense has not gotten off to the start that a lot of people expected. With the talent they have in the receiver room and with Caleb Williams, it's been a slow on-ramp so far. On the Texans side, Nico Collins had 8 receptions for 135 yards and a touchdown. He has back-to-back 100-yard games now. He's vaulting himself into a top X receiver in the NFL. I don't know what number you want to fill in the blank with there. Top 12, top 15. I wish Mark was here. I could ask him that question. But he's vaulting himself into that top X receiver conversation in the NFL. And CJ Stroud just continues to do CJ Stroud things. 23 of 36, 260 yards and a touchdown. He's distributing the ball. He's now gone 7 straight games without throwing an interception, which is the longest active streak in the league. And so there you have it. That is our week 2 recap. We see the NFC South take down a lot of NFC contenders. Things are shaping up perfectly for the Eagles. If they can go get the win in the home opener tonight against the Atlanta Falcons, they would sit atop the NFC with a chance to knock off one of the other undefeated teams in the Superdome next week. So that's going to do it for this episode. Thank you for joining us for episode number 170 of Chalk Talk. If you enjoy what you heard on the show, and we know that you do, again, please consider subscribing to the Eagles Pinpool Network. It is free. It doesn't cost you anything. Even if you normally watch us on YouTube or Twitter, we've got a lot of great Eagles content that comes into the feed. And honestly, even if you don't listen to it, which listen to it, you'll like it. But even if you don't, downloading that really helps us out. It helps us as we're trying to monetize this so we can continue to put the same amount of time and effort into it. So smash that subscribe button, turn on notifications so you don't miss our next episode. Drop us a 5-star rating wherever you stream your podcast. We'll be live with a post-game show tonight. Birds of the Round Table will drop tomorrow. Wednesday will be Johnny and I's film review. Thursday, the Armchair Scouts. Friday, Eye on the Enemy. And every weekday morning, we'll have an Eagles Check Down episode for you to give you a 5 to 10 minute update of what's going on with the Eagles. You can follow me on Twitter and YouTube at ShaneHalfNFL. And I'll catch you guys next week for a week 3 recap show.